What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video today. We got the Major 3 qualifiers starting on Friday, and I wanted to begin the week with sort of recapping all of the Rostermania stuff that happened last week. I think there's still a few unresolved questions, and I'll speak on them when we get to it in this video, but I wanted to recap all the teams making changes, give my final thoughts, and kind of give a little bit of a preview of how I think the teams are going to play. So some of this you may have heard before, but I wanted to make like one combo video so that you can reference easy peasy with all the roster moves. So let's dive in, starting with OPTIC Texas. All right, so as you may know, iLLeY has been moved to the bench, and we'll get to the Ender thing in a second, but DanGhosty has been picked up. Let's talk a little bit of biographical information on Dan, because I think it's important to sort of understand sort of his journey. Dan has only really been competing on lands, I think, for like 3 years. I believe he started during the Cold War year, but last year in Vanguard was the year that he really started to play on some better AM teams. He started teaming on Boston Academy with Shawnee, Doug Center Martin, and Kremp, aka Volans. He ended up getting dropped off that team at the end of the year, and he was kind of bouncing around to different squads, but really found his footing prior to the Elite with the Decimate Gaming FeLo Enterprises team that kind of came together last minute, sort of a fun what if story. That team like wasn't really a team until the roster lock right before the first Elite qualifier, and then they obviously went to the Boston Open and played really, really well and won that event. And he parlayed that into getting picked up on the team. And by the way, like Dan had a lot of teams trying to pick him up. We'll get to the other teams that made roster changes in a second, but like he had at least 2 to 3. I heard a 4th, but I don't know if I believe it, offers from some squads. There's definitely interest among CDL teams to pick Dan up. And obviously, if OPTIC comes calling, you're going to pick that one. So yeah, Dan has joined the team for iLLeY. Now, we haven't heard really like the full story, I think, from OPTIC on this roster change. We may get that in a process video at some point down the line. Hook just did an eavesdrop episode with Hector, which I recommend you check out. It was a really good interview, but Tyler didn't really say much about the iLLeY thing. Obviously, he's sort of newer to the squad. I was kind of talking with Nameless and Crowder last week on stream, and we thought really the only reason that this kind of move might happen is some behind the scenes stuff, because look, yeah, Ender's not the best slayer, and Dan brings some more stuff to that, and we'll get to that in a second. But the only reason I can think of that they would part ways with a guy they've teamed with for a long time is there's some stuff behind the scenes that sort of was getting in the way of winning, and they felt like they couldn't get to that spot anymore. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with Ender next. He's been linked to a number of teams. I think his salary is too high for a team like Vegas, so it's likely that iLLeY might be riding the bench here, at least until the end of the major, but we'll revisit that if he gets more interest here in the next few weeks. So what do I think Dan is going to bring to this team? Well, obviously, he's going to be a little bit of a better slayer than iLLeY is. I think iLLeY's that sort of more methodical player. Dan is some of the best slaying talent we've seen in Challengers this year. I believe he had the highest, or one of the highest KDs in all of the Elite Global, both NA and EU, and he obviously played really good at LAN as well, so you know he's not just someone that's comfortable in his bedroom. He can run AR. He also can run a sub. We saw him at times last year with the sub, and I think that'll be really key for a team like OPTIC that needs to find their footing on a map like the one we're watching, Embassy Hardpoint, which you really need a sub out for that last hill in Kitchen. I think he can also run a sniper as well, which will, again, speaking of Embassy S&D, help fill a void, especially if Dashy's not going to snipe for them sometimes. I think this will be a really good addition from the slaying standpoint. Now, my only thing with this move is I think bringing in Dan's going to be a good one, but they still have some other systemic problems that OPTIC needs to work on. One is they're not as disciplined as the other top teams. I'm mainly talking about FaZe and Thieves, and I don't think that this move really fixes that. I think that might require another change, and it may not even be a personnel thing. I think, you know, for this, in my personal opinion, this team to really succeed, I think they're going to need to build out their coaching staff a little bit more, but need to find the right people that fit, and I think that's a longer term problem for them to solve. I still think the other issue that they have is the SMG decision making between Shotzi and who kind of cost them in series against Thieves, and that's something that the two of those guys need to work on before this home major in front of their crowd at Esports Stadium Arlington. So DanGhosty isn't going to fix that. Again, he'll get more kills than iLLeY, so they should be a little bit more comfortable on the slaying standpoint. But you know, if Hook and Ant are kind of making the wrong decisions, screwing up spawns, all that stuff, I mean, Dan's not really going to solve that problem. I think the last thing that OPTIC needs to work on is really expanding their map pool. In Hardpoint, obviously these guys are really good on Hydro, and a lot of teams don't want to square up with them on that map, and they're pretty good at Hotel, even though they won a lot of those hotels. But outside of that, the rest of their map pool is kind of iffy. They really struggle on Mercado. Fortress is not a map that they won in stage 2. And Embassy is still continuing to be a struggle map for them. So I think they need to find a third hard point. Search is good though. I think even with Dan coming in, you know, they're looking good on that search map pool. Again, outside of Embassy, but I think that's a work in progress for them. And Control has been good. So if they can expand that hardpoint map pool, I really like the long-term prospects for the squad. So they have LAG coming up, I believe, on Saturday. They should win that match. But OPTIC is a really tough schedule for these qualifiers. They've got to play Toronto, Rocker, NY, and FaZe after that. So we're going to learn a lot about this OPTIC team from these online qualifiers before their majors, so I'm excited to see them dive in. I like the move. There might be further moves needed to really get this into a championship dynasty, if you want to call that, like a really good repeater championship team, but let's see what they do. All right, next up, we have the Boston Breach, and as you may know, Methodz has retired. He's now doing full-time content. That was a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, we're going to miss in. The rumor is that Beans is coming in to replace in. It's basically a one-for-one change. Beans is an AR. He can snipe. He's a funny dude. I think like the vibes and sort of the sort of I don't know what to call it, but I just think just sort of the dynamics are going to change without Zen, and it might kind of help this Boston team that's really good, but man, they find new and different ways to lose more so than any other team, and I really want to see them take the next step up. And it hasn't been formally announced by the org yet, but Beans tweeted out like a screenshot yesterday based on some banter on Twitter, and you know, he like censored his name out here like in the corner. You can't see it's in blue text, which is the worst, but it's Zinny, but that's really Beans. So I think Ben's going to be coming in, and I think y'all should be really excited because he's a really good dynamic player, just like DanGhosty. I mean, he was the other big slayer in challengers. I know the Boston Academy team a little iffy, and we'll talk about them more, I think, in a video later on this week when we start talking about the elite, but I think Ben's going to come in and do wonders in the league. I think he's going to be really funny. I want to get him on and do an interview at some point as well. But I think this will keep this Boston team good. I really like this move. I think he was going to feature in the lineup at some point. That being said, for Boston, it's not about skill. It's not about map pull with this team. It's about finding ways to get yourself able to close mentally. And they've really struggled with that as a team. If they can get over the hump, this team is very dangerous. This is a team, I think, skill-wise, that is going to match FaZe and Thieves in the way that they play. Much more aggression than those teams if they can get the mental side of things under their reign, or it's just going to continue to be the same sort of top 6, top 4, top 8 kind of ping pong with the squad because they can't ever beat the good teams on land. So let's see what happens. All right, let's talk about the final two teams. We're going to start with Florida, and both of these teams have not had, when I talk about Florida and Vegas, both these teams have not announced their full roster yet. Same with Boston, but this one actually has Jacob Hale source, so I at this point assume it's going to happen, which is Capsidal and FeLo coming in, and their roster is going to be Cap, FeLo, Brack, and Havoc. That means that a couple of people are going to part ways. So Major Maniac is now an unrestricted free agent. Vickle is going to be on the bench, and Florida actually yesterday tweeted out that Dave Patty's been released. So Vickle is the one sort of remainer, and Mike and Dave are going to be sort of unattached to the org. I like the move for Florida. Again, FeLo coming over just as DanGhosty did from the Decimate team that won the Boston Open, so that team's kind of being pulled apart. And I think for Florida, what I think is key about this move is sort of two things. One is, I think Capsidal's sort of a takeover player that they really lacked the submachine gun role. I think Havoc is really good, and especially in S&D, he's a takeover player, but Respawn has always been iffy with him. He's now paired with a sub who I think is really good at Respawn and also good in search. So this team really shouldn't lose a beat in that game mode. And you got FeLo coming in at AR. And look, Tyler's not the greatest slayer in the world, but I think, you know, Major Maniac has talked about this on Twitter, and there's been rumors about this for Florida for a while, that the camp isn't the best. They're not the most disciplined. They really lack like the winning experience. I think FeLo can come in here and set culture, which I think will keep him on the team long-term theoretically, because they lack it and they need something, and they need something to build around this project here, because it's just, the only thing that they have going for them is they beat an OPTIC a couple of times on land. So they need something to go. I like the moves. Let's see though, because of how stacked the CDL is, how much higher up in the chain they actually move amongst all teams, because it's just going to be hard for them with the rest of the talent in the league to really, even with this squad, make an impact, but you never know. During these major qualifiers, they need to play FaZe, New York, Boston, Seattle, and LAG. So I think they're, you know, for Seattle and LAG, I think those are potentially winnable. The other three, maybe not, but 2 and 3, maybe you get into winners. you never know. So let's see what this team does. All right, last one. And this one, I got to say, I've been diving on this on the last couple of days, and this is sort of a fluid situation. Basically, it looks like Vegas is going to replace both of their SMG players. Ronnie from over at CDL Scrim Intel has tweeted that Kremp coming over from Boston and 2Real coming in are the changes. I feel pretty confident about the 2Real move based on what I've heard behind the scenes, because he's moved on from his Challengers org. So I feel like that one's probably happening. The Kremp one, I've heard a bunch of different names as this potential second sub. So I don't know if that's a 100% move. Roster lock, I believe, for the teams is today in terms of letting the league know who their squad is. So I think we should get some clarity on this soon. Interesting move from Vegas. Obviously they didn't have a good Major 2 cycle. Their S&D started to fall off a little bit. Respawn is just as worse as it was before. So replacing their subs, which has been their weak point in Respawn, I kind of see what they're doing there. Obviously losing TJ is big. He's been their best search player, but hasn't been that good at Respawn. So the calculus there, I kind of understand. Is really tough on Tej, but I think in order to compete with other teams, they just needed to make a change there. But this one's interesting because I actually really like Kremp. Again, another Challengers player who is a top KD in NA, is clearly good at the Challengers level. We'll see. It's a really tough opportunity for your first team. We've seen what happens to Johnny and Lau and all the people that have ever come through this organization at the sub machine gun level as their first shot in the CDL. It's really hard because you're just not going to have as good teamwork as other teams because it's Vegas, let's be honest. But he's nasty and could be a potential game changer for this team. 2Real has played really well at the Challengers level, but his last pro stint with Florida didn't go that well at the end of last season. So I don't really know what to expect from 2Real. Don't really know what to expect from this Vegas team. They're just, they went from being a serviceable squad to, I don't really know what to say. Last major, I gotta be honest, this is one of those teams just like London where I feel like their teamwork is so poor that people are feeling like they need to sort of play for stats to kind of keep their spot on the roster. And that's the opposite of what you want for a team in this situation. If you want to upset teams when you lack talent, the way you're going to do it is via teamwork, not having negative teamwork. So it's kind of a weird situation. And once again, I think unfortunately Vegas is sort of falling towards the basement of the CDL. Once again, they got to play Thieves, Toronto, FaZe, Rocker, and LAG during these qualifiers. And that is really hard. Definite, I see 4 Ls and maybe an LAG dub. So I think this team is in trouble once again. That's probably why they make these roster moves, because they want to try and get some honeymoon here and get some wins on the board before Major 3. So let's see what happens for Vegas. But I don't know, man. What I thought was a promising team at the beginning of the year, they just haven't kept up the progression. They haven't kept up the teamwork. And I'm a little worried that, the rest of the league has kind of passed them by and they're going to kind of go through the motions the rest of the season. So yeah, those are the roster moves that we've heard about for these Major 3 qualifiers. No changes for Seattle, even though they played really poorly at Major 2. We'll see what happens, though, if they have another bad stage. No changes for London, surprisingly, although they made changes mid-stage, so I wouldn't really rule anything out there. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of these roster moves, kind of how you rate them, thoughts. If you think other teams should have made moves as well, I'd be happy to hear those out from y'all. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more. We're going to be putting out a lot of Major 3 qualifier preview content this week. I'm waiting for the Breaking Point fantasy competition to unlock for this major, so we'll make a video on that and help you guys out with that competition. We're going to do a little bit of a Elite Stage 2 preview that kicks off, I believe, later on this week, if I'm not mistaken. So excited for that. And obviously got the Major 3 qualifiers coming up this weekend, and we'll be covering those in some preview content, as I said. So excited to chat about that. As always, guys, we will see you on the next one.